George Foreman was one of the most feared boxers in history. With a terrifying knockout ratio of 89%, only a handful of his opponents ever heard the final bell. Anyone who dared to step into the ring with him had to endure brutal punishment. He competed in two of boxing's toughest eras, and he dominated them both. Even legendary champions stood little chance. Making it past the first round was considered a victory in itself, but defeat was inevitable. Foreman was a true juggernaut. He could absorb the hardest punches like they were nothing, and once his opponents realized they couldn't hurt him, the fight was already over. Today, we rewind the clock and revisit the top 5 greatest knockouts delivered by one of the most devastating punchers the sport has ever seen. When 41-year-old George Foreman stepped into the ring against Jerry Cooney in 1990, few took his comeback seriously. Once the most feared knockout artist in boxing, Foreman now carried extra weight and appeared far slower than in his prime. Many viewed his comeback as little more than a sideshow. With youth on his side and a fearsome 86% knockout ratio, Cooney seemed like a legitimate threat to the slower, older Foreman. From the opening bell, both men showed they meant business. Cooney landed some strong shots, using his reach and power, but Foreman gave just as much as he took. But in round 2, everything changed. Big George began landing his jab with more authority, slowly backing Cooney up. A devastating combination sent Cooney crashing to the canvas. He beat the count, but he was visibly shaken. Foreman, calm as ever, strolled toward him almost as if he were out for a nice walk, completely unfazed and relaxed. Then came one of the most epic uppercuts in history. It snapped Cooney's head back, and though he somehow stayed on his feet, he was on borrowed time. Seconds later, Foreman unleashed a thunderous right hand that ended the fight instantly. The preacher knocked the puncher out. George Foreman wasn't just back, he was still one of the most dangerous men in boxing. The fight between George Foreman and Ron Lyle was one of the most legendary slugfests in boxing history. It wasn't just a boxing match, it was a war. Both fighters were known for their incredible knockout power. Foreman had a staggering 89% knockout ratio and was ready to destroy anyone who stood in his way. Lyle, no slouch himself, ended 72% of his victories by knockout, making him a serious threat to anyone who dared to stand toe-to-toe with him. Foreman, trying to bounce back from his devastating loss to Muhammad Ali, had something to prove. But Lyle wasn't there to play a supporting role. From the opening bell, it was clear this wouldn't be a tactical chess match. It was a brutal brawl. Both men threw vicious shots, each punch carrying fight-ending intent. The momentum swung wildly. In the 4th round, Lyle dropped Foreman with a thunderous right hand, putting the former champ in serious trouble. But Foreman, showing immense grit, got up and came right back, knocking Lyle down just seconds later. Then, in one of the most epic rounds ever seen, Lyle floored Foreman again. It looked like the end, but Big George refused to give up and he rose again. In the 5th round, he launched a relentless attack, battering Lyle with a series of heavy punches. Finally, Foreman knocked Lyle out, ending the war in spectacular fashion. When George Foreman stepped into the ring against Ken Norton in 1974, fans expected a war. A year earlier, Norton had shocked the boxing world by defeating Muhammad Ali and breaking his jaw in the process. He wasn't just a contender, he was a legitimate threat. Foreman, meanwhile, was the undefeated heavyweight champion of the world, boasting a terrifying record of 39 wins, with 36 coming by knockout. His knockout ratio hovered around a staggering 92%. Norton himself entered the fight with an impressive record of 32 wins and 2 losses, with a terrifying knockout rate of nearly 77%. On paper, this was a high-stakes clash between two of the most dangerous men in the division. Many believed Norton's unorthodox style and physical strength would pose a real challenge to Foreman's dominance. But what unfolded in the ring was anything but competitive. From the opening bell, Foreman imposed his power. Norton tried to stay mobile and work behind his jab, but Big George quickly cut off the ring and began landing heavy shots. In the 2nd round, Foreman drove Norton back into the ropes and unleashed a brutal combination of hooks and uppercuts. The ropes were the only thing keeping Norton upright. He sagged into them, clearly hurt. Seconds later, Foreman landed another barrage of powerful punches that sent Norton staggering across the ring. Foreman smelled blood. A final vicious combination smashed through Norton's defenses and dropped him hard to the canvas. This time, Norton didn't get up. It was over in just 2 rounds. A man who had gone the distance with Ali was simply overwhelmed by Foreman's raw, destructive force. One of the most epic moments in boxing history came in 1973, when George Foreman faced the reigning heavyweight champion Joe Frazier. Smokin' Joe was riding high, having defeated Muhammad Ali in the legendary fight of the century 2 years earlier. Known for his relentless pressure and brutal left hook, Frazier was expected to be a true test for the undefeated Foreman. But what happened that night shocked the world. Foreman entered the ring with a perfect record and a reputation for terrifying punching power. Still, many believed Frazier's constant forward movement and championship experience would wear the young challenger down. Instead, it was Foreman who imposed his will from the very first exchange. Just minutes into the first round, Foreman stunned Frazier with a thunderous uppercut. Frazier hit the canvas. He got up, only to be sent down again and again. Foreman didn't just knock Frazier down once or twice. He floored him 6 times in less than 2 rounds. Each punch Foreman landed seemed to lift Frazier off his feet. The champion had no time to recover. Every time he stood, Foreman was there, launching another explosive attack. The crowd watched in disbelief as the seemingly indestructible Frazier was systematically broken down. Finally, after the 6th knockdown, the referee had seen enough and waved the fight off. In a stunning upset, George Foreman was crowned the new heavyweight champion of the world. Perhaps the most legendary chapter in George Foreman's career, and one of the most incredible moments in boxing history, came in 1994, when Foreman faced undefeated heavyweight champion Michael Moorer. At 45 years old, Foreman was thought to be well past his prime. Moorer was younger, faster, and technically superior. Most saw the bout as a mismatch, and for 9 rounds, it looked exactly that way. Moorer boxed beautifully, using his speed and footwork to control the fight. He peppered Foreman with jabs and combinations, while Big George plodded forward, landing the occasional punch but absorbing far more than he gave. On the scorecards, Foreman was clearly behind. Commentators began talking about his bravery, his legacy, and how admirable it was that he could still compete at such an age. But George Foreman had other plans. In the 10th round, he began pressing Moorer more aggressively. Foreman landed a crushing straight right hand to Moorer's chin. The champion was knocked out. The referee counted to 10. And just like that, history was made. George Foreman, at age 45, had regained the heavyweight championship, 20 years after he first held it. He became the oldest heavyweight champion in boxing history. Against all odds, against time itself, George Foreman did the impossible and delivered one of the greatest knockouts the sport has ever seen.